Suid-Afrika het Israel verlede week in die Wêreldhof die stryd aangesê. Suid-Afrika voer aan dat Israel die VN se konvensie oor volksmoord oortree en vra die hof om Israel te verplig om sy aanvalle op Gaza te staak. Daarteenoor sê Israel hy het die reg om homself te beskerm. Om oor hierdie uiters verdelende kwessie te praat, verwelkom ek 'n kenner van internasionale reg, professor Martie Bradley. Die regskenner advokaat maak Oppenheimer en professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk sluit ook weer by ons aan. Martie, ek wil met jou begin. Geen net ons klaarheid. Wat presies was Suid-Afrika se saak voor die hof? Dit was nie om te sê dat wat besig is, wat nou besig is om te gebeur, volksmoord is nie, maar dat dit moontlik volksmoord kan word.
In terme van die tydelike maatstawwe waarvoor Suid-Afrika gevra het, die doel van hierdie saak, hoekom dit so belangrik was vir Suid-Afrika, is nie om te wag tot meriete nie, maar dit 'n dringende aansoek gebring om te sê dat hulle wil hê die hof moet ingryp omdat volksmoord moontlik gepleeg word. Maar die maatstaf is anders. Ek dink dit is baie belangrik om te onderskei tussen die saak op meriete en hierdie dringende aansoek wat gebring is. So what South Africa actually did is that there's two parts to the case. The one part is to ask for provisional measures. For example, they listed the provisional measures, Israel stopping intervening, humanitarian relief, and so forth. And because of its urgency, then the court only looked if it is plausible that perhaps genocide is being committed, and the whole case rests on the interpretation of the Genocide Convention because both South Africa and Israel are party to the Genocide Convention. But it will be heard on merits later on, where South Africa will actually have to show intent, which is very difficult.
Mark,
difficult to do.
There was a lot of emotion displayed when the South African legal team made their case. Is that something that the court will take in account at all?
Look, it's hard to know what a court will do. It is a very emotional issue. I think it's an emotional issue for people on both sides. If we think about the events of October 7th, you have the terrorist organization Hamas deliberately annihilating Jewish men, women and children, engaged in some of the most egregious acts of rape. One of the examples that was verified by the New York Times in their study and mentioned in the court proceedings was of a woman being gang raped while her breast was cut off and thrown away, that she was executed while still being raped. So you are dealing with very emotional facts. And now what a court must do, of course, is determine whether South Africa has made out a case that it's plausible that Israel has genocidal intent, and it must look at all of the facts. And what you found was that what South Africa did was to cherry pick certain statements made by individuals. Really the requirement is to ask, what is state policy? There was a particularly embarrassing moment where a line was made attributing speech to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where he refers to Amalek. In other words, Amalek are a biblical tribe who were aiming at the destruction of Israelites. There are meters away from the International Court. There is a monument of a Star of David to recognize those that were killed during the Holocaust, and it describes the Nazis as Amalek. So what came out in the Israeli side to say, well, if you look at the speech properly, you see that it's very clear that who's referring to is Hamas, not Gazan citizens. So you have this very different approach in terms of what South Africa claims and what comes out in the case.
Anthony, jy skud jou kop.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that you repeat some of the propaganda that's come up during this court case. The New York Times, is that a reliable source for you?
Is dit nie vir jou nie, Anthony?
No, on this particular... Okay.
Maar waarom sê jy so?
Ja, miskien kan ek 'n stapie terug staan. Dit is emosioneel vir albei kante, want albei kante het mense verloor en daar's 'n oorlog aan die gang. Die groot probleem vir die Palestynë is die oormatige gebruik van geweld deur die Netanyahu regering. In die poging om Hamas te neutraliseer of eradicate, te vernietig, en in die poging sê die Israeliese regering, ons is nie skaam as mense in die pad kom van ons strategiese doelwit om van Hamas ontslae te raak nie. Dis hoekom 20 of 30.000 mense in die proses dood is, kinders en vrouens ingesluit. Nou ja, ons weet ook nie wat die hof gaan beslis nie. Ek stem met Martie saam dat dit belangrik is dat daar hierdie tydelike maatreël geskep moet word om 'n einde te bring aan die sinnelose slagting van van Palestynë in Gaza en ook in die Wesbank. En as ek kan bysê uit 'n politieke perspektief of 'n geopolitiese perspektief, die gevaar dat die konflik kan vererger en in die streek inloop en dat ander lande betrokke raak of verder betrokke raak. Amerika is reeds die wapenverskaffer vir Netanyahu se regering, maar Iran kan meer betrokke raak, Hezbollah en so aan. Dit is 'n groot gevaar. Dis hoekom ek dink die Wêreldhof se uitspraak waarvoor ons wag, asemloos wag, is so belangrik.
Ek dink wat ons net in gedagte moet hou is ons het nie die hele bewyslas gesien as publiek nie. Ons het Suid-Afrika se applikasie gesien en ons het dan die mondelinge voordragte van albei partye gesien. Maar Israel het ook ander bewysstukke opgehandig aan die hof. So wat ons op TV gesien het, is nie noodwendig die hele storie nie. So ek dink 'n mens moet baie versigtig wees. Dis moeilik om te sê wat is die maatstawwe wat wel getoon is en die hof kan ook enige tyd vra vir meer bewyse en dis baie moeilik, maar op hierdie stadium moet Suid-Afrika nie aantoon dat daar wel die intensie was om volksmoord te pleeg nie. En in Bosnië en Servië 1993, Gambia, Myanmar 2020, Oekraïne, Rusland 2022, het die hof wel tydelike maatreëls toegestaan, maar nie noodwendig wat die partye gevra het nie. En ons moet ook onthou, ons is in oorlog en
Maar jy het al voor in die punt gemaak dat ons is in oorlog. So hierdie argument van Israel, this argument that Israel has put forth that they acted in self-defense. Did that change when we went over to an armed conflict?
Yes, that is a very important point, and I think that is something that you have to almost be an international lawyer to understand, because there was a lot of outrage. How is Israel not allowed to defend itself against Hamas? But we have very specific language that in peacetime, before the war, a state may protect itself in self-defense under the UN Charter or customary international law, but that is not the applicable legal framework. Because if you have occupied territory, then the law of armed conflict applies. If you have, it depends on where you stand on Gaza, Palestine as a state, but you are now in the law of armed conflict because there is an armed conflict. It doesn't mean that Israel cannot do anything. They're in armed conflict, so they may launch military operations and military attacks, which means something different in armed conflict. En so ook kan Hamas, want albei is partye tot hierdie oorlog en gebonde deur internasionale reg. Maar dis baie moeilik om werklik toe te skryf, want wat is moeilik is hier het 'n mens 'n streeksoorlog waar die densiteit baie hoog is. So urban warfare is when you have close range conflicts in a city. We have this in Khartoum in Sudan as well. And this makes it very difficult for both parties to apply the basic principles of IHL. And this is, for instance, the principle of distinction. Jy kan 'n soldaat of 'n vegter van 'n rebelle mag teiken in oorlog, maar jy mag nie burgerlikes teiken nie. Dan is daar proporsionaliteit. Al teiken ek hom, moet ek die proporsionaliteit in ag neem. A higher value target, you might have a bigger collateral damage assessment. So this becomes very difficult if you have buildings in close proximity and Hamas and soldiers mixed in between, and often both Hamas might be in buildings such as hospitals, then it loses protection. But these rules apply both sides of the conflict. So it's possible that war crimes have been committed by both parties to the conflict, which is the case for the International Criminal Court. But it's very difficult to attribute the high death toll. How do you know which dead bodies is attributable to Hamas? What is attributable to Israel? So ons sal regtig moet kyk, as 'n mens op die tweede dag gekyk het Hamas die streeksoorlogvoering argument gemaak, want jy mag oorlog voer, maar daar's sekere reëls waaraan jy moet speel en dit mag dalk lyk soos volksmoord, maar as daar nie die intent is nie, maar dit is dalk nie volksmoord nie.
It's all very technical, Mark, but I think where we are now is Israeli First, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that they will not be deterred because Hamas' stated interest is to wipe Israel off the map. So pragmatically and politically, this is where we are now, and this is where Israel is. So regardless of what the court says, they might not listen to anything that the court finds.
Yes, I think it's premature to prejudge what the finding of the court will be. I first of all need to say that it is astonishing to me that a claim could be made about the rapes, to deny them and describe it as Israeli propaganda. First of all, the New York Times piece involves the interview of 180 people, eyewitness accounts. I imagine that if someone were to deny rape in any other situation, it's the kind of thing that we would find so sickening. But when it's about Jews, then it's okay. And that seems like a serious problem to me. But if you don't believe the New York Times, the paper of record for the last 75 years, you could just believe Hamas. They filmed themselves performing these actions. They celebrate the attacks on civilians.
That's not true. Have you seen the videos?
Yes, I have seen the videos.
I've also seen the videos. I've not seen what you're speaking about.
Anthony, sê jy dat daar geen gevalle was daar?
Nee, dis nie wat ek sê nie. Ek sê daar's 'n klomp propaganda wat gebruik word om veral van die Israeliese kant.
Maar daar was 'n inval. Daar is mense vermoor.
Ek het daai video's gesien. Ek het vir 'n uur lank gekyk hoe die inval gepleeg is. Dis die regte woord om te gebruik. En hoe die Hamas vegters, jy noem hulle terroriste nê. Settlers, Israeliese boere vermoor het voor die voet. Daar's ook die hele propaganda storie oor die ryf, die partytjie wat die jong mense gehou het langs 'n settlement.
'n Kibbutz.
'n Kibbutz, dankie ja. Ons moet bietjie meer nog uitvind oor wat presies daar gebeur het, want daar is 'n oop vraag oor hoe die Israeliese weermag gereageer het op die Hamas-vegters wat by hierdie partytjie aangekom het. Jy het die foto's gesien van al die karre wat so uitgebrand het en verwoes is en mense wat verkool is in die proses. Nou 'n Hamas ou met 'n AK-47 kan nie dit doen nie. Die argument is dat die Israelies helikopters gebruik het om missiele te skiet in die poging om van Hamas ontslae te raak, maar sonder inagneming van burgerlike sterftes. Dis 'n war crime against humanity. Dis hoekom die internasionale strafhof sal moet toetree tot hierdie gesprek op 'n stadium.
Okay.
Maar wat vir my die belangrikste ding is om te sê, Lorenzo, dink ek is die saak wat Suid-Afrika na die hof toe gevat het, maak die deur oop vir die moontlikheid van 'n gesprek oor 'n skietstilstand en 'n onderhandelde skikking om te praat oor die toekoms van die Palestynë en die Israelies. Reg en geregtigheid en sekuriteit.
In the interest of time, Mark, I just want to give you the last word. Just repeat the question. Israel have made their future plans clear. You said we don't want to preempt what the court finds, but if they do find in South Africa's favour, what do you foresee Israel will do?
Yes, well, it would be an astonishing thing if Israel were prevented from protecting its own citizens under circumstances where you've said Hamas have pledged to perform on October 7th again and again and again, that they must, of course, be given that right to defend their nation under Article 51. There are, of course, a variety of different things that the South African government seek. Some of them are humanitarian interventions. Some of them is a ceasefire. Of course, the ceasefire is only aimed at Israel. It wouldn't require Hamas to desist in attacking Israel.
Ceasefire? Ceasefire on both sides, right?
Yeah,
no, it doesn't say that. If you go and read the relief that's sought in
I just quickly want Mark to finish his point.
If you read the relief that's sought, it specifically names, it says Israel will be prevented from engaging in military conduct within Gaza. It doesn't say and Hamas will be prevented from engaging in military conduct in Israel. So it is one-sided relief. We know as well that the African National Congress have shown massive appreciation from us. They met with a delegation with pictures of Sumra and Pausa behind them. That Naledi Pandor went to Iran and spoke to Hamas and congratulated them. We know that an election is coming around the corner, and that it would be very useful to be able to get some support from these tyrannical nations so that the ANC can fill up its coffers.
Martie, Mark, Anthony, baie dankie. Bly ingeskakel.